they kind of just put parameters in this algorithm to go through and just chop heads. And there's not enough bodies on their risk team to genuinely look at case-by-case situations like this. And the only time that they will is if it's like very, very substantial volume.
But do you think that's good faith? Right? Because here's the thing about operating under a contract. You've got a duty to operate in good faith. And when you're considering the livelihood of a business, and then you're considering that there's a computer algorithm making decisions related to that, which is really black and white and has nothing to do with the gray in a contract of what actually constitutes good faith. I mean, that's where I have an issue.
Welcome to the Payments Experts Podcast, a podcast of Global Legal Law Firm. We hope you enjoy this episode. We're really excited today. We've got in studio joining us Christopher Dryden, who's the founding and managing partner of Global Legal Law Firm, as well as our special guest. We got Matt Steinbrecher over from Sound Commerce. Matt, it was great having you on the podcast last time. We're excited to continue the conversation. We're discussing VAMP, Visa's new rules, and we're looking forward to a great conversation. Gentlemen, take it away.
All right, what's up, Matt? Good to see you again. Haven't seen you since that sweat fest in Phoenix. I think it was brutal, man. It was so hot over there. So when we were at WSAA, nothing had happened. Well, let's actually backtrack a little bit more. Last time you were on, it was great to have you on. We talked a lot about, certain merchant relationships, white glove service, what Sound Commerce kind of does, and how it views the industry and the value add services that it provides for merchants out there. The one of the topics of our discussion was VAMP, which was going to go into effect after a 6-month extension on October 1st, and that's happened. And I think kind of our talk today is going to be about, you see any difference? Is like anybody raised anything to you? I will tell you, I'll get into my story because I had something yesterday happen that I think was a product of VAMP. But ultimately, I'm not sure if it was triggered by it, but it was kind of interesting. I can give you the parameters for that one. But have you seen anything?
A little bit. We're definitely not seeing like drastic merchant shutdowns yet. I think the main thing I'm noticing is quite a bit of sorry. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. The main thing I'm noticing is quite a bit of disruption in terms of the underwriting process for net new clients. So we're seeing kind of a shift in the portfolio of what's acceptable to certain agent, like ISO setups, and then just, tier 1 processors as well that typically don't work through the agent model. That's kind of the main thing that we're seeing right now. And it's because the fines haven't hit yet. So we got, October 8th today as of the day of recording. And I think once November hits, that's really where we're going to start to see some shifts dramatically. And I think that's where we'll start to see some heads getting chopped a little bit, or just fines getting kicked in and merchants being pissed that maybe they are being overcharged or there's not a lot of transparency in what's going on. So I think really November is when things are going to kick in, but everyone's starting to track it for sure. That's been a big priority.
It's interesting you say like there's been some changes in the underwriting process and what's acceptable and what's not outside of trial and error. Is there anything where you kind of have some sort of foreseeability of how you need to approach the underwriting process and its changed format?
Yeah, I think it's, as an example, a lot of people now are asking for upfront, RDR and Ethoca, verifying Ethoca confirmation agreements before they even issue a merchant account, which is usually a little bit backwards as to the way that things were done. You kind of get your merchant account, you get your information that you need to enroll with verifying Ethoca, and then you kind of start to go live and ramp up quicker once you're fully enrolled. So we're starting to see a bit of a shift there where a lot of these ISOs are doing much more due diligence up front. We're seeing a lot of them as well will force depending on the risk profile of the merchant, but they might force enrollment on their side, which obviously is more revenue for them. But we are seeing there's friction there for merchants, because if you're running a multi-mid strategy and you've got one provider plugged in directly with Verify and Ethoca, and then you have 3 other mids that you have directly with some other reseller of Verify and Ethoca, it gets kind of tricky to manage because you don't have as much visibility at an aggregate level for each mid. So we're starting to see some stuff like that as like the preliminary underwriting. And it really just comes down to like, make sure that you understand what your ratios are right now. So from our last conversation, what we were doing in anticipation for our portfolio was, and a lot of other shops that I work with, we were kind of just maintaining and managing the rates for VAMP, pretty much ignoring the old thresholds and really just looking at the per mid VAMP ratio of the kind of that 2.2% as it is for now, and it'll go down next year. But we were really just maintaining and looking at those ratios with the TC40s, and then trying to be upfront when you get a new merchant account or going to the risk team, that we've kind of done our due diligence and we know what we're looking at. Now, granted, for merchants that don't operate with more strategic agent ISOs, it's very hard for them to do that kind of stuff, because it's the calculation seems simple, but getting all the data and doing it properly can be a little complex for someone who's not in payments.
I want to go back to the Verify and Ethoca part of it, because what I think I heard you say was that as the ISO underwriting becomes more stringent, you're seeing that they're going to require these merchants to come under their umbrella with Verify and Ethoca. And there's more money associated with that because now there's another service that's being strapped onto the merchant processing. But what does that mean for guys like you for visibility into what's happening? Is that depriving you an opportunity to take your expertise in payments and utilize it to the benefit of the merchant, and you're somewhat being replaced by the ISO? Is there going to be some symbiotic relationship there? I mean, I'm interested to... Because to me, part of what's interesting is that every time that you consolidate things at the ISO level, the quality of service goes down. And I think where you are actually getting a foothold is that you're not trying to be an ISO, you're trying to have strategic relationships with types of merchants and perform a service that the ISO, they'll take the processing and board the account, but they're never going to give them that service. So when you kind of take a portion of that service and you upstream it, right? What does that look like for a guy like you?
Yeah, it's that was my exact reaction when I saw some of the shops requiring it, and kind of had to, most of the registered ISOs that have been sponsors that I work with in the US, they understand my business model, but it was kind of just rehashing that with them and letting them know if I don't have that visibility, it makes it difficult for me to protect all of us involved, right? And make sure that the merchant's on side with ratios. If I see something going south, that I can start acting on it. Maybe we get hit with a fraud attack, whatever. So that way I'm looking at TC40 count as of October 8, not as of, November 1 when it's too late.
Yeah.
So, that's really where it's more of a strategic conversation, but a lot of them just kind of, they want like a no exception type of rule, because if they make an exception for one agent ISO, then there's going to be exceptions for others. And, it might depend on residual size and merchant profiles and all that kind of stuff. But these are for both low and high risk merchants, by the way. Anything card not present, pretty much it's getting mandatory for most of these guys to be able to run the RDR and Ethoca. But yeah, I mean, it's a little bit prohibitive. Most of them give insight, like they'll give, like a read-only access to whatever platform that they're using, so we can see some of it, but it makes it a huge pain for us to do it. So a lot of those shops, we either said, hey, we need to figure something out here that works. So like programmatically, we can get it on our end into a single view and really be able to look at all the mids at once, because that helps us protect the entire portfolio for everyone. Or we can't work together. And I've seen a couple, I've chatted with a lot of the other larger agent ISO shops too, who kind of do more of a bespoke thing where they're a little bit more involved than your typical guy who's like, hey, here's an account, see you in 3 years. And those are all having similar conversations with these larger registered ISOs that are, trying to force it on their end, especially too, because it's cost prohibitive. They might be charging like $10 over what their buy rate is because, of course, it's a new line of revenue for them. And they pitch it to the agent. It's like, oh, yeah, well, you're going to make some new money here. And the agent's like, yeah, but everyone knows you're ripping them off. And so they're not going to accept this price because it's, it would be like increasing your buy rates by 1%, It's
an ISO that doesn't really understand the high risk or e-commerce segment, right? I mean, I almost wonder if this maybe isn't an opportunity for guys like you to just go full on payback and figure out how to get in the stream of it all. If you manage the risk better than the ISO is going to manage it anyways, and you're doing it real time, do you just want to get into the mix of the whole thing and figure out how you're going to, hold risk and just be a payback associated with it? Because I see payback agreements, like true payback agreements going out, and I don't know what the full qualification process is because I just look at the agreement and I understand how the agreement operates, but I don't know from the underwriting of the payback what they're really looking for. But, I recently saw a WorldPay one, it's they're out there, and, from what I'm being told, like it's a potential relationship that exists, but I almost feel like it's forcing you to maybe like move that direction. Am I off base with saying that, or what do you think?
Yeah. I think to a degree, once you get large enough, normally from what I've seen in the space, like you need to have maybe 100 to 200 solid new clients coming in monthly to justify like regulatory payback overhead compliance, right? And then just having the velocity. But we're seeing it more and more that there's going to be a big consolidation in the space as well on just the acquiring side, and some of these, particularly these higher risk bins, I think they're going to get swallowed up by some of the larger shops. But looking at, kind of the agent ISO that moves towards a payback model in order to have more control and of course more risk, but really just have more control of the overall book and then still have the redundancy with a few different bin sponsors potentially. That's for sure something that a lot of the other shops that I'm chatting to about, like, how are you navigating this? What's kind of your general strategy? And, no one totally opens up the Komodo, so to say, but I think a lot of people are starting to consider that route. But it is a lot more work, right? It's a whole different ballgame of having to bring everything in-house for the most part. And we do quite a bit of it in-house already, so it wouldn't be like too much of a shift for us as a shop at Sound, but some of the other guys, it would be pretty dramatic in terms of a lift to, bring in-house underwriters and risk team and all of that. KYC, KYB, and all the different tools that come with that. It can be a pretty expensive lift up front, but ultimately I think that's the best way to get the control and really just manage your overall portfolio super well. Because then you're much more flexibility, I think.
I think from a transaction management standpoint, it's just way better. It's kind of like being the bank at the casino a little bit. It's kind of how I see it, right? Like the odds are going to be in your favor as long as you don't operate super poorly. So I do believe that, like, taking that risk, there is a substantial reward associated with it. But let me tell you what I came across yesterday, which I thought was really interesting. I'd love to get your opinion on. Yeah. I had some guys call me yesterday. They have a new corporate filings, registered agent, corporate governance document, registered agent service, will be your registered agent in a particular jurisdiction. And these guys have people that sign up with them. And it's a legitimate business. They do new limited liability companies, corporations, your annual reports, whatever's kind of needed for somebody who wants to start a business and just wants somebody to kind of hold their hand through it. And they were processing with Stripe for 7 years. And I can only attribute to what has taken place to me, because they told me that there wasn't really a spike in anything, to VAMP. So they're with Stripe for 7 years. They process. They have a ton of recurring billing. And the reason that they have recurring billing is because the packages that people buy with them, those packages include all of these services, some to take place in the future. So when that future service is going to be delivered, they actually do some sort of transaction at that point, and their contract, which has a click to agree, and it's an electronic application. There's some sort of ISP capture, and somebody's signing, but these are legitimate businesses, and over a weekend, Stripe held, and it wasn't really held money that bothered him, but held a significant amount of money, and then basically said, "We're terminating you. You're too high risk." So these guys are like, I don't know if they saw it coming, but they pivoted and found a relationship with a payment gateway. The held funds wasn't their issue. That was like level 2. Level 1 was, we got a whole bunch of recurring billings coming up at the end of the year and the beginning of the year. Will you please migrate the tokens from Stripe over to our new payment gateway? And I asked them, is there anything in the contract and the terms and conditions that talks about data migration and like a fee per token or whatever? Because it's possible. It's just a matter of, is it contemplated under the relationship with Stripe? And the hard part with Stripe is all their terms and conditions, like everything's online. You don't know what fucking terms and conditions really applies, right? I mean, you don't know necessarily
and it
pricing.
changes.
Yeah, it's pretty nebulous, right? So that aspect of it, I don't even know what the contract rights are necessarily. I don't know what terms may apply based on different time periods. These guys have been processing for 7 years. And their big thing was, we don't want to have to go and contact everybody that we already have the authority to do a recurring billing to recapture the information. Okay? Yeah. So, and this came without warning, like no warning at all. Level 2 was that they cut them out of the back end. And so now they cannot do returns. And so not only is there going to be a return anyways, and there's money on hand, right? But now Stripe's going to make a little bit of money off each one of those chargebacks because they get to assess a fee, and that fee is originated basically by them not cooperating. These guys went to Stripe and said specifically, hey, you can keep that money and then we'll fund a escrow account with you because you have treasury services, and can we do returns out of that? Stripe said no. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy, right? I mean, how can you not see this as opportunistic on Stripe's part? But we'll see where it goes. But think about the level of interference with their existing business relationships that is taking place that Stripe is aware of because they've been processing it for them for 7 years. I don't care if Stripe knows specifically. They specifically know just based on the relationship and how these things take place and everything that they've been doing for this business. And these guys, to their credit, weren't like obviously they're concerned. They kind of looked at it as more of a huge pain in the ass and what's my potential loss going to look like. Weren't angry. Didn't seem like guys that would come at you. But it's gonna, I mean, even right now, I mean, they were talking, these are significant losses if they can't get some of this because the amount of manpower to go and notify these people. And so I asked them, what's been your historical return rate? And they're like, and I said, because you guys are aware of VAMP, right? And they said, yes. And I said, what is it? And they said, well, it's kind of high. I don't even want to say what it is on this, but it was kind of high. And I said, well, what's attributable to that, right? And they said, we're actually penalized because we freely return money to people. Let me give you an example. Do you know what percentage of businesses fail in the first year or that just are abandoned? That we have the authority to go bang a card for the following year, but nobody notified us. So once they see the charge and they notify us, we just give them back the money, right? So that artificially somewhat inflates our return rate. Another thing is that people order a service through us that is like 6 months out, right? Like we don't even need to do it. We're not going to hold their money for that period of time, and then give them the service in 5 months. Like, so we return a lot of people and say, hey, this is premature. We'll notify you about 30 days out from the deadline. We'll gather any new information. Just look for our email, but here's your money back, right? And they said, that's just a couple of like easy examples, but that's why our return rate has been what it's been. But really, our actual like default rate on transactions is under 1%. It's more like 0.7%. We're just, because of how we've operated, we've never had to worry about this. And I said, look, I don't know if this is because of VAMP, but it's October 7th, and I'm thinking that this is just a change in operations related to VAMP. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an uncommon story for them.
Not for Stripe. I get that. I agree. Yeah. I think Stripe does shit all the time that doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't even know if they're looking to make money from what they're doing. I think it's just not really. They're a technology company. They're not a payments company. So sometimes I think that that's an issue. But this seemed the timeliness of it seemed odd.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely could be related. You know, the high return rate is for sure something that they're looking at, especially with their open exposure and just their total book. But when everything's done with like a, you know, like you said, it's a tech company, so they're using like an AI risk algorithm, and a lot of the time because they have so many, you know, millions and millions of clients and merchant accounts. Even the ones that have been existing for 7 years versus the ones that have been existing for 7 days, they kind of just put parameters in this algorithm to go through and just chop heads. And there's not enough bodies on their risk team to genuinely look at case-by-case situations like this. And the only time that they will is if it's like very, very substantial volume.
But do you think that's good faith? Right, because here's the thing about operating under a contract. You've got a duty to operate in good faith. And when you're considering the livelihood of a business, and then you're considering that there's a computer algorithm making decisions related to that, which is really black and white and has nothing to do with the gray in a contract of what actually constitutes good faith. I mean, that's where I have an issue.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's, you know, they, as we know, they do this stuff all the time. It's not new. And I think they definitely are starting to purge the portfolio. They have been slowly for a while, but they're definitely getting more and more aggressive. I think for two parts. One is that they're very heavy in e-commerce, which is generally cyclically, you know, a big time in Q4. They're also very heavy in SaaS, which now SaaS companies are also, you know, offering discounts and stuff within Q4 for the holidays. So general spend is going up right now. And I think their concern is that if they don't sort of chop some of these accounts that they perceive as high risk for whatever reason, like a refund rate of 40 or 50% or whatever it might be for this example, where the justification is there, they just look at it, you know, black and white, as you said. And I think it's totally in bad faith. I don't think that it's, you know, I think they have an obligation to kind of fulfill their side of the contract. But as you said, their terms are online. You click to sign. And unless you kind of redline that contract heavily and can hold them to it, it's very hard to see that moving target, particularly when you've been a client for 7 years and the contract has wildly changed in that time frame, I'm sure. And I think, like, you know, for them to do this in a responsible way, like it makes sense for them to say, okay, we don't want your account, but give them some sort of termination time frame. Yeah. Right? Don't stop them from submitting refunds, because that's bad for everyone. You know, and obviously allow tokens to be migrated and say, hey, you've got 30 days to get off the platform. We're going to allow you to do refunds.
Charge me for it.
In order for us to do that, you need to load up your account with X.
Yeah, charge me for it. I don't have any problems with that. Go ahead. You know, it's that's the thing that is, it's the disruption in a merchant's business that they just look at the merchant as a cog and don't see the real life impact of what they're causing to individuals like that own it, whatever employees, whatever stress they're about to put on this business. Like that, there has to be some sort of balancing of equities associated with that. Like that, I just think it really gets missed, especially when you deal with a tech company that they want to embed chips in people and just have them fucking be inhuman. So, you know, that's my little diatribe.
Excellent. You guys, that was a great conversation. Matt, so much. We're so grateful for you joining us once again. Everybody listening, please, you can find Matt Steinbrecher, Sound Commerce, at sound-commerce.com. We got all the information down below. Thank you for this conversation today. We're looking forward to the next one. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Payments Experts Podcast, a podcast of Global Legal Law Firm. Visit us online today at globallegallawfirm.com. matters discussed are all opinions and do not constitute legal advice. All events or likeness to real people and events is a coincidence.